Well, welcome everyone. It's wonderful to see you. It really is. And Kyle, be sure to take a screenshot, if you would, of the group. Yeah, we are so fortunate to be here today with Emmanuel Cappellin and his partner, Charlotte, and Susi Moser and Diana Liverman to talk about this extraordinary film, Once You Know. I think I've introduced all of our guests to you in our emails, so I won't do that right now. I will simply ask that Kyle, you go ahead and highlight the four of us so that we can start our conversation. And trying to see how we get, oh, you're doing that. You're setting it up now. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. And can I ask everybody to mute if you would? Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Still getting some music. Yeah. Terrific. Thank you. Well, so this is such an ambitious film, and it's ambitious to ask the 3 or 4 of you to speak about it, frankly, where to begin, you know, but of course I want to start with you, Emmanuel, as the visionary for this incredible contribution to our awakening collectively. So you entered this process a long, long time ago, this process of realization. And in fact, I was lucky enough to meet you with Susi on sort of an early front end of the process when you came to Clark to film Susi as she gave a talk, a keynote for our climate change teach-in in 2015. And we had, you know, I think of this work you're doing as more, of course, than breaking silence, but you were also driven, I think, by the question of breaking silence. And we had done this Council on the Uncertain Human Future launch the year before in 2014, very much because we felt there was a sort of collective silence around the question of what we were facing. So there we were similarly, I think, feeling the need for there to be presence collectively around these questions. And so in your own deep journey, could you just talk a little bit about, you talk about it in the film itself, of course, the origins that brought you to making this film, but if you could just say in your own words a little bit about why you felt it was important back when you first started it, and then how has the making of the film changed you? How has this process changed your life?
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. Before I answer, I've done it by email, but I want to do it again publicly. I want to thank you, Sarah, for allowing the 2015 shoot we did at Clark. You and the other people who facilitated, but you were the main character of that little story. Thank you, because it was actually our second shoot. We had done some preliminary interviews with the different protagonists, including Susi, but I had done only one shoot before with her in La Hague in Europe. And so I was just a few days from having my first son, my only son, born, and I was very stressed about leaving the territory, and it was a lot of stress, and you made it easy. So thank you so much for bringing that first piece of the puzzle of the story into being, and thank you very much. And I'm really happy that I can finally share the film with all of you, because it's been 7 years in waiting. Since 2015. And thank you, Susie, of course, for thinking that this would be a good idea to film, because it is a very, very important opening at the end of the film towards questions of spirituality, or more generally of what's happening inside us. It starts that way with the film. And this is your question, Sarah, is you know, what's the first movement that pushed me towards making the film? And my answer is that I knew that there was something was important, but I didn't know what it was. And that was very difficult. And I think it's difficult for any artistic endeavor, is that you have this inner drive, but you're not exactly sure. The boundaries are quite difficult to grasp. And it makes me think of a conversation we had with Susie in France between two flights under planes flying over our heads near us, Charles de Gaulle near Paris, where she was talking about what hope is. And hope is a bridge without railing. And you know that you have to go from point A to point B, but you don't even know what point B is. And this is exactly what I was experiencing. I didn't know exactly where I was going with this. And the process of the film changed me out of necessity, because any good story needs the character to be transformed by his journey. But so it's a good storytelling technique, but also because very literally the film and my life, because they happened over a 7-year period, were intertwined. And because I was making this film, I was starting actions that involved with Extinction Rebellion. But that's one thing, but moving to this village here is another. I'm talking to you from Saillant, a small village at the foot of the Alps in France. And there was really a going back and forth, and being involved in these movements, advocacy and direct action, non-violent civil disobedience movement, also had an impact on what the film was saying. And so it was really a back and forth, where at some point I didn't even know, what was the film and what was my life, and because really the two were one. So that's, I would say, the process of changing. And how did I change? I would say mostly I now feel comfortable talking, like you were talking about breaking silence. I feel comfortable putting words such as collapse, collapsology, which is the study, the transdisciplinary study of collapse, not any collapse, but the collapse of our own current industrial society as we know it. And because of energy and climate pressures and other planetary limits. And so this is something that I didn't even have words for even at the beginning. So I'm supposed to be short, so I'm going to stop there, but this is really what it was about. It was being able to put words, and because I could put words, I could start thinking of images and putting them together into a story.
Wow. It was emergent, it sounds.
Very much so.
Yeah, which is the best way. Yeah. Well, Susi, thank you, Emmanuel. Susi, what was it like for you when Emmanuel approached you and asked you to be part of this, to share your sense of where we are and what it means? What was that like?
Well, hi, everyone. I should say hello first. What was that like? Well, so many things in my life have started not knowing what I'm saying yes to. And this is one of those things. Maybe if I had known quite how demanding it was, how long it would go, and how deep it would look, maybe I would have said no. But we were introduced to each other by Joanna Macy, so that kind of answered like 90% of the question for me right there, I would say. And it was, I guess when I look back on it, I would say it's obvious to me why this was a good thing for me to do, and why it was an obvious next thing for me to do. This is very much the direction that much of my work is taking, and what has been of interest to me for a long time, to bring attention to our internal transformation and to the emotional realities that we as scientists live with. So, you know, that probably answered the other 10%. I don't know. It's hard to, you know, reconstruct that. I can't. I know we were in Santa Cruz. Maybe you consider that a preliminary conversation, but Emmanuel was filming me at home, and you know, it was. I doubted a number of times whether I want to continue with it because it was just going on for a long time, and you know, it just took a lot of time to put into it. And it also felt right. It felt really important to bring attention to our experience. So
I have to give you a little anecdote that I think sums it up. After we were shooting on the beach, it was one of the coldest and windiest morning of the year on the beachfront where we were filming the scene at the end of the film. And we walked back, and she said, you know, as a wild, as a nature guide or a wilderness guide, I have to tell you, we're going to go into hypothermia if we don't leave. And we're walking away, and she said, you're just relentless, aren't you? You're relentless. And I think this is the relationship.
Thank you. Well, Diana, you were not in this film, but you could have been, given the powerful work you've done in this area for your entire career. And so if you could talk a little bit about what this phrase, coming to know, or once you know, has meant in your life, and how the changes that wrought for you in your work and life. That would be terrific. And thank you for being here.
Diana, you're on mute.
You're mute.
Can't believe we still screw that up after 2 years. Anyway, good morning, everybody. I'm Diana. I'm speaking to you from Tucson, Arizona, the unceded lands of the Tohono O'odham and Yaqui indigenous peoples. So clearly watching the film made me think about when I knew, or when did I really feel awareness of what has happened? And oh my gosh, it was decades ago. I mean, I just figured out that Susi and I have known each other for more than 30 years. But my awareness of climate change arose when I was a student at the University of Toronto, and I was a teaching assistant for a wonderful Canadian climatologist, Ken Hare, and he showed the Keeling curve, you know, the one of the carbon dioxide going up and up and up. But I had also, as an undergraduate in England, had Limits to Growth as a textbook. So watching the film took me back to reading and discussing Limits to Growth as an undergraduate. But I actually want to say that I think I knew even earlier, but what I knew about was how vulnerable people of the world, particularly the poor of the world, can be. And that awareness of vulnerability, which has dominated my whole thinking about climate change, was seeing that they're not natural disasters. It was seeing disasters on the news, the famine in the Sahel, the cyclones in Bangladesh, and seeing this suffering that was partly caused by nature, but was also being socially created by structures of poverty. So I think I took that knowledge about vulnerability into what I then started to understand about climate change. And I'm wondering how many other people on this call can connect empathy and concern around what we used to call natural disasters, and whether there's something different in translating it to climate change. But I often think about that very long connection of feeling grief for people who are dying and can't do very much.
And we get such a sense of those vulnerabilities in the film, especially in Bangladesh.
Yeah, but if I could say, one of the things I liked about that segment of the movie is that Bangladesh was a place where millions would die from cyclones and flooding. And I think what Salim ul Hook and others in Bangladesh have done to reduce vulnerability and to adapt to the risks of climate change is actually a big source of hope.
Yeah. Very true. Remarkable. The presence and clarity of the people on the ground in that segment of the film. Yeah. Well, thank you, Diana. Back to you, Susi. If you could share a little bit about your current work in relationship to this situation, because, you know, in the film, Emmanuel speaks of feeling helpless and exhausted at times as the film unfolds. And you work every day with climate professionals who are burning out and needing support as they're working with and facing these dark realities. What do you see happening with them, and what do you think is helpful for them and for us?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, so, you know, just to say that much of my career, I've sort of followed Diana in her footsteps in terms of looking at vulnerability, adaptation, barriers to adaptation, all those things, you know, and I think going through waves of deepening into understanding what it all really means and where the trends are headed. And, you know, so that's sort of the context. And I think many of my colleagues, particularly the practitioners that I work with, so planners, engineers, sustainability directors, you know, people who work in communities, right? They also have come to this, once you know, kind of insight, this level of revelation of the gravity. And I don't think it happens all at once, you know. I think it goes for them as well in stages of realizing it more and more. And not just the science, which they look at, but being confronted on a daily basis, how the systems to respond to it are stacked against action in many, many ways. So, you know, we could tell endless stories, and for every story of the system being stacked against it, you have a story like that in Bangladesh where people, you know, push against it anyway. So it's not a done deal, if you will, but the work against those barriers, legal, political, financial, you know, the attitudes of people, all of those things are really, really wearing people down. We've done with a team of people I've been working with sort of consecutive survey with network after network of adaptation professionals, and we find consistently about a 20% higher burnout rate than the American public in general. So I can't say how that is in other countries, although the need for this kind of, you know, support for these people is emerging in all countries that, I mean, many countries that I'm aware of. Anyway, so if that's the case, if people are burning out and climate change and these intersecting stresses and challenges are behind it, what do they need? I think people need very practical, you know, pragmatic sort of help in getting breaks, in learning how to take care of themselves, taking care of each other. But I think it's more than that. You know, these people live in the communities that are being affected by disasters. So they themselves experience the trauma that they are supposed to, by the nature of their job, help their communities with. You know, just think of the town of Paradise in California when it burned down. Every single person on the town staff and the town council lost their homes that night. So while you have nothing to put on your back, you don't know where your kids are going to go to school, you don't have a place to sleep, you're also supposed to help your community, you know, rebuild, right? So, I mean, it's that kind of intersecting of your own experience of trauma and helping people with trauma. Planners are not trained in trauma-informed, ways of being with their communities. So there are a huge number of skills to be imparted for people who now have aspects to their work that they were not asked to have as much before. And then there is this transformation that we're talking about, right? There is the need to make a very difficult transition from a fossil fuel dependent, growth oriented, capitalist, you name it, all these, systemically racist, all these kinds of systems to something that is more life sustaining, more humane, more, restorative on all these levels, natural and social. And most people don't know what it means to, what are the transformative skills, if you will, that we need. So I think it's both a skill building and how do we keep going for the long haul? And I think we ultimately, I keep being told that by people that these are skills we all need. It's maybe just who needs them first, because we've put them in charge of our lives. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Following up a little bit on that, Emmanuel, and on what do we need? I feel as though in the film you really encourage us to slow down, to be more tender and more vulnerable and real together in the knowledge of our situation, in addition to ways we can participate and act. I'm wondering if you could talk, and maybe Charlotte, you too could talk about how you experience that in your own life right now, the sort of deepening into vulnerability and presence, and then also that moving toward ways of participating more fully.
Sure, I'll start, and then I'll let Charlotte add whatever she would like. I'm a really bad example of slowing down right now. I'm carrying this film forward out into the world, and it takes a lot of energy and time, and so it's do what I say, not as I do at the moment. But it's at the heart of the way we're trying to talk about or answer the question that's on everyone's lips when they come out of the film, which is, okay, what do I do now? Or what should I do? Or what do I want to do? And so we have created a pool of facilitators that go into the theaters to discuss these questions with the public, to encourage being vulnerable with each other. And so we have open phrases about how people feel about climate change and what they think. This is actually a quote from our preliminary interview with Susi. She said, I want a town hall of where people can exchange and talk about and grief and the joy they feel about climate change. Ask your neighbor, what do they feel, not what do they think? And this is really what we've tried to do and create these mini town halls in the theaters. So that's one aspect, which is because it's not as polarized, the debate about climate as it is in the US, in Europe. But we still have these denial mechanisms that come into place. And so you need to break through that. We need to use the power of movies, which is to speak to our emotions rather than our minds. And then from that the back door, then we can discuss and be rational. But in France, it's difficult also because there's been a great response to what we're offering, but culturally the French are very Cartesian, and so they're talking to emotions. It sounds like a really bad idea that was really successful in the 30s, of getting the masses really aroused about around these getting emotions in the way of rational thinking. So it's a delicate balance, but I'm going to, is it possible for me, Kyle, to share my screen? Because I would like to show what we've been distributing. No, it's not. It's not. Too bad.
Really hard.
Then we'll do it low-tech style.
That's something. Yes, good.
We have created a website called Roots of Resilience, and it's the interactive version of a paper guide we've been distributing for free in theaters. We distributed over 15,000 of them, and basically it kind of answers in one image your question, which is people come at it from either they want to be really active and they want to be very positive about it, kind of like the Paul Hawken kind of crowd. We're going to find solutions and we need to be positive and we need to talk about desire and love of doing things to get people motivated, and talking about fear is just going to push people away. And so we're talking to this crowd with on one part, and we're talking to the crowd who says, okay, I really need to process that. This is a really big chunk to chew. I really need time and I need resources. So this is what we call regeneration. Then we have a third aspect, which is s'interposer, holding actions in English. So this is all, of course, Joanna Macy's work. And basically we try to put it into practice, and we created, get up. This.
Emmanuel, we will send any links we can send. Oh yeah, wow.
So this is, now I'm going to have Charlotte explain what's on there very briefly.
And it's just the 3 ways of holding actions.
Holding actions.
Yeah, holding actions, regenerate our culture, and build the alternatives. Yeah. So what's interesting is that it says you can pick up which direction is deeply moving you, and not everybody has to take care of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And also that for being balanced, we need to not only be into actions or outside or building, but also taking care of ourselves, what's happening to ourselves inside. And I feel a lot of people, they really prefer being into actions than taking care of feeling what they are feeling. And that's how they burn out. And that's also how we burn out, both taking care of this impact campaign and building this movie outside in theaters, meeting people and trying to get them feel what they don't want to say, tell what they don't want to say, feel what they don't want to feel. And so I think it's so important to have different period of times, and sometimes we go into action and sometimes we slow down to feel and maybe to reorient what we want to do, and what is maybe not taking care of everything, but taking care of what is our own best way of contributing. Yes, and I feel a lot of people, especially us, want to do too much, and that's what's very tricky. That we want to do our best. We want to do our best to change things, and things are not changing quickly enough for us to feel okay. Now we can rest, and that it means I feel I need to be very responsible of myself. Then, okay, I've done my best, and now for a little moment, I'm going to rest, and then I'll come back stronger. And I feel this is such a tricky path to keep balance, and we are not good examples, but we are struggling, and I think learning a lot.
Yeah, aren't we all? This is the way at this point. Please do send me the links, Emmanuel, and I'll distribute them for your information.
Yeah, so this is right now we're in the process of translating so that we have an English page, but for now you can see how the tree works on the French website. And within about 1 or 2 weeks, we'll have it up for the English version.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Well, Diana, in light of what we're talking about, can you say anything about the young people that you work with and where they are in this process? You know, we're thinking now about what, yeah, I'll just let you go. How can we be with them in this process also?
Yeah, so the last few years have been teaching undergraduates, so 17 to 20-year-olds in fairly large groups, because I teach at a big state university. And I've been teaching a course on climate and society that tries to include not just the science of climate change, but all of the social and humanities and arts around that. The students I teach, I mean, there's a lot of things I hear from them. There are the ones who become completely mobilized by what they know. And then they're trying to change the university, they're trying to change communities, they're choosing careers that relate to sustainability. And there is another group who understands and panics, but then retreats or moves towards life as usual. And I think the other thing I want to say, I want to come back to the theme of collapse and maybe understand more about why we're focusing so much on collapse. Because my own experience as an author of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report on 1.5 degrees is actually, I'm feeling guilty about what we said, or the way in which what we said was misunderstood. Because there was this narrative when it came out in 2018 that we only have 12 years to act. And we actually did not say, and then the world would fall apart. We said, if we don't act in those 12 years, it will be more challenging, it will be warmer, it'll cost us more to respond. But the number of young people who heard us say, we've only got 12 years and then things are going to collapse, and how upset they were about that message made me feel that we had a failure in communication, because there's such a danger in talking about collapse or apocalyptic thinking that you immobilize people. And so I am writing against collapse quite a lot of the time, to say it's going to be slower. Some people will suffer, but you could be okay living in this place. And talking about solutions and trying to provide hope, not because I don't see that dark side, because I have worked on it for so long, but I got to the point where I felt, particularly as a teacher, that I was spending too much time talking about collapse and environmental apocalypse, and not enough time talking about hope. And just to wrap up, one of those sources of hope is actually understanding what's happened with vulnerability. And I'll ask my students, what's happened to poverty worldwide in the last 30 years? And they'll all say, it's gotten worse, it's terrible, it's terrible. But in fact, we've cut poverty in half in the recent decades. Millions of people have come out of poverty and are living better. And one of the contradictions is that some of them are now emitting a lot more greenhouse gases because they're living what they consider to be better lives. So there are contradictions there, but I don't want to forget the amazing things the world has done to try to improve social justice, or how much we've protected the world, in terms of forests and parks. And I think that that's a source of hope as well.
Thank you. I haven't heard this from you before. Thank you. Well, let's have Susi share a little bit following up on that, perhaps, because in the film you speak not so much to the specifics of collapse, but how to be with ending, transformation, change internally, and to a different way of being on the earth. Can you say more about that?
Oh, like in 3 minutes? Are you kidding?
2.5 minutes.
Well, so, maybe this is something I want to maybe connect the two, this or the path I try to walk between sort of the hopeful and the sort of darker outlook. I think for me, and I don't know, Diana, I've written about this and certainly spoken in your classes about this, but for me, in order for you to have hope, you must have uncertainty. If you are certain it's gonna all end in doom, you don't need hope, you're done. If you're certain it's all gonna be fine, you don't need hope. The only condition under which you can actually have hope is when you're not certain about the outcome. And you can make choices as to how you want to live in the face of that uncertainty. And, whether it's Emmanuel and Charlotte, exerting themselves in the work of building resilience, or whether it's me trying to help, at the moment, adaptation professionals to at least keep going with the very good work that they're doing and equipping them with skills to maybe move away from just maintaining the status quo, which is high emitting, unjust, all the rest of it. Or, whatever my work will be, who knows? But to me, it feels like we put our shoulder against the wheel of, of basically all the forces that are working essentially to undermine the ability for life to continue on this planet. I don't think it's going to look, in a sort of break off a cliff, whatever, at 12 years, everything is going to end. But I think what we're seeing already right now, a lot of the, increasing number of disasters, wars over finite resources, people looking for certainty in this period of great uncertainty, and people like Putin or Trump or whatever giving them this kind of cognitive certainty about the future and what's good. I mean, those are the kinds of signs in my mind of a collapsing system. I am a student of Donella Meadows. I've seen the data of how we're following on the high end track of that curve and where that goes. So I'm not denying that, but what are the niches of I don't know, think about it in the terms of a cocoon, right? The imaginal cells, first a little bug has to essentially, dissolve, but what's left are imaginal cells from which something new goes forward. What is that? What are we preserving? What are the imaginations of a better future that we want to preserve and carry forward? And, how do we, this is the council question, how do we want to conduct ourselves in the face of those realities and those possibilities? So for me, it's, preserving my own life and preserving my community and, and equipping others as best as I can with that. But it is very, very hard work to let go of what, seem to be, yeah, that's normal life. That's the dream of a good life, having a house and having whatever, if you want to have kids and all those things, right? Those are difficult things to let go of. And that grappling, helping people be in those conversations, that's what I feel called to do now more than anything. That's the hard work of transformation. So.
Thank you. So well said. We're coming to a close. I'd like to go around the circle though, one more time. And if each of you could speak briefly to the question of from where we are now, which is a bit of a distance from you having made the film, Emmanuel, and also with what's going on in the world right now, all of the ways that we're being altered and buffeted by profound events. What is right now most in your heart and mind about this film and what it offers us? So just in a sentence or two, what's your mind and heart about the film and what it offers us? And yes, Emmanuel and then Charlotte, why don't you start?
Okay. Well, for me, what it offered me is the opportunity to interact with the public, and interacting with the public, the question of what do we do? What do we do comes back. So it has, the past several months has slowly built up new energy for a new project about what I call the politics of collapse, but that we hear in the university phrased as Anthropocene politics, or at least in France. And these are people, sociologists, anthropologists, political science researchers who are thinking of, okay, we're not going to desire degrowth. It's not sexy enough. People are not going to buy it, but it's going to happen. We're going to experience degrowth. So then how do we accompany that process as policymakers? And my next project is basically going into a promise in the film, which is, I say, we're in my little village and we hear Pablo Servigne talking about collapse, and I say, okay, let's go with collapse politics. And then, we say, okay, wait, let's just try to transition. Okay, transition sounds nicer, not as uncomfortable. And so right now we're still in the transition, phase. And I think collapse politics are just something that's horrendous, that we don't want to think about it, but it's going to, I think, this is my personal belief, is going to happen. And so we should think about what kinds of politics we want. And I'm not being very concrete here. There are many examples I could give you, but basically this is what's exciting to me, is saying, okay, this film is putting out not new questions, old questions, but it's trying to break the science about these questions we all have in our hearts. And now can we answer them collectively by creating politics that are inclusive and that speak to the social disaster as much as the environmental disaster, because the two are going to be converging more and more. And I'll just give you one hint, so it's very concrete, and then I'll shut up. It's called in France. So we have a very good net to protect, social net. But what if tomorrow the social contract that we have all come to agree is the basis here in France is no longer possible? Well, what can we offer? Instead of unemployment money or social security or retirement, what do we replace it with? And people are starting to think about something that's called the social security of food, or food social security, saying we have a certain number of calories that we all have a right to, and how can we right from now, right today, thinking about the future of collapse and bringing it to our present and changing the way we raise food today, and saying, okay, well, people can be farmers, can be labeled that they can be part of that redistribution of food if they grow food in a certain way, with regenerative agriculture, for example. And so you can grow up to scale with these kinds of things. And so you can answer many different problems or questions at the same time. So this is the kind of work that's interesting to me at the moment. And it's kind of a seed in the film, and now it's sprouting into something else. Sorry, that was too long.
Okay, I'm going to very brief. What I'm doing at the moment is trying to experiment within my own life degrowth, degrowth of activity, of my own energy spread. So I'm really trying to face loneliness, emptiness, breathing, contemplation. Well, just trying to observe this reality we are in, without trying to get busy with something else in order not to face it. And it's very difficult indeed, and at the same time very nourishing. And so one concrete step would be just take appointments with yourself, appointments with just yourself and nature, or loneliness, or silence. But really open those spaces very regularly with a lot of discipline in order for facing the rest of activities that are gonna pop up anyway. That's
Thank
it.
you. Thank you for that inspiration and counsel. Diana, what's your thought? What's staying with you from the film?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me about what the next steps were.
You know,
a couple of things that are staying with me from the film. And Emmanuel, I hope you take this as a gentle critique. I'm going to send Emmanuel a very long list of female climate scientists, because I got a little frustrated in the first hour because women weren't speaking with a voice of authority. And it was so great when Susi came in. I'm like, yes. So I would like to suggest some wonderful people to interview, because one of the things I work on is women in climate science. I run a Wikipedia page. There's two other things that I'm taking forward. One is I'm in the middle of writing a whole bunch of reports for something called the Earth Commission about how we find our way to a safe and a just future. So how do we respond to climate change whilst also bringing people to level of well-being, everybody? And I'm struggling a bit because your corridor narrows once you're trying to meet all of those multiple goals, but I think there are ways to do it. And I popped into the chat a link to an event I'm involved in around Earth Day. His Holiness Dalai Lama is hosting a symposium virtually, and I thought some people might be interested in it. But really, I'm taking away from the film, I have to work even harder, both to communicate, to be comfortable with myself and my own life going forward. But I'm still out there sort of screaming into the void about we can act, but there's hope and there's lots of solutions. Thanks.
Thank you. And Susi, if you can bring this to a close with your response, what are you holding from this film?
You know, there's this one scene, I can't remember if it's in this version, but it's certainly in one of the trailers, where Emmanuel asks me or interviews me on the beach, and I point past his shoulder and say, but you know, you got to turn around and look at the sunset. And to me, that's in many ways my daily work. Besides looking into the dark, to, you know, to keep finding and keep noticing and staying awake to what is actually beautiful. And that is, for me, the reason to keep going. This morning before this call, for 4 hours, I was in the garden planting seeds. And, you know, to me, this is the sort of balance that keeps me going, and that I hope everyone doesn't dismiss this as unimportant. Every single plot of blooming flowers is going to be important, both for our sanity and for the butterflies and the birds and everything. So in some ways, that encapsulates a lot of what, you know, has been important for me going into the movie, and that is still important coming out of it. And, you know, I see that in Emmanuel's own life of, you know, now he's into agriculture, right? So we are all trying, we are part of an organism trying to regenerate and keep life going. And, you know, we think we're so in control, but what if we are just being acted on by that larger life force that wants to move us back into life? So anyway, that's where I am and what I try to practice in my daily life.
Oh, perfect way to come have this conversation draw to a close is understanding us all as part of that organism that's adapting and listening and hopefully celebrating the great beauty all around us. And thank you, all of you, for being here this morning. Oh, Kyle, can you please show us all each other before we break into council circles? Can you give us a big gallery view?
Sure, 1 sec.
Okay. I just found my own, so fabulous to see everybody. We're going to take, of course, a break at this point, about 5 minutes to do a stretch. Kyle is going to organize us into breakouts, and we'll consider a few questions around the film and these topics. And our guests are going to join us in different councils. So this will be a random selection, and you don't know who and from where your group will arise. But I look forward to seeing some of you in one of these, and thank you all for being here. And as I say, we'll take a 5-minute break. So come back at the hour, and Kyle will be giving you an assignment that you can select now, but we'll begin at the hour, just a few minutes. And again, thank you, Emmanuel and Charlotte and Diana and Susi, for this wonderful conversation this morning.
And before we split off, Sarah, may I do a little bit of cheering for the film? Is that okay?
Cheering? Did you?
I don't know what's the word. We're releasing the film internationally at the moment. This is why we're doing this discussion. And from April 8th until Earth Day on the 22nd, we're organizing film screenings. And so if anybody that's part of this conversation wants to bring it to their university or outside at their work or with their community, they're welcome to just, maybe you can connect them with Joris.
Yes.
And after that, in June, it will be available on streaming, and it will be much easier. But right now, we're trying to do public screenings. So yes, that's
wonderful.
it.
Yeah, anybody who wants the contact information, just be in touch with me. I saw that Jim Paradise had already asked, and I'd be happy to give you the links to Pulp Films and how you can connect to showing the film. Thank you for that, Emmanuel, and I'm glad it's going to be available on streaming. Needs wide distribution. So let's actually come back at 5 after the hour, okay? Everybody get a stretch and come back for our council sessions. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.